In this video, we're going to show how to do linear regression with the TI-84 calculator. Now, we're going to show how to do a few things. First off, the most important part is we're going to show how to find the least squares regression line from a given set of data. We're also going to be able to find the Pearson Correlation Coefficient from that set of data. And then after we do that, I'll show how to create a scatter plot using the TI-84 and then how to graph that line that we just found. So let's jump into it. Our example is going to look at oil consumption from the year 2009 to the year 2015. That source of the data I found was here. So let's take a look at the oil consumption in these years. So let's assume that we're going to use the year as our X value and the oil consumption in billions of barrels of oil as our Y value. Now, some people may use a different X value. They may start with an X of 0, meaning indicating X of 0 starts at 2009. Then an X of 1 would be 2010. But I'm just going to write 2009, 2010, and so on and so forth in as my X values. And then obviously oil consumption, I'm going to write in as 31.42 and know that my Y value is in billions of barrels of oil. So I turn my calculator on, and the first thing I need to do is input that data. The way I input data is I go into my stats menu and I make sure edit's highlighted and I edit my lists. Now I've already put in the data for this example. I put in the X values in list 1 and the Y values in list 2. If you didn't already, or if you had stuff in your list 1 and list 2 already, you could actually clear that out by just hitting the clear and then hitting down or enter, and then start inputting your X values. So my X values are 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2015. You could do the same thing with your Y values as well. I put the Y values in list 2. I won't delete those, but there they are. If you want to follow along, you can push pause on the video and input those values if you'd like. I'm going to go back to the home screen. I'm going to hit second and then the quit. And now I'm ready to find my least squares regression line. I hit stats and I scroll over with the right arrow to calculate. And then number 4 is linear regression. If you're doing other types of regression, you can do other types of regression. So linear regression, the one that I typically use is number 4. You can also swap the roles of A and B and use number 8 there as well. I'm going to use number 4. I have my stats wizards on in my mode. If you don't have this screen, it'll just say linear regression, and then you'll have to put some things in. My X values went into list 1. My Y values went into list 2. I did not have any frequency list with this, so make sure your frequency list is blank, and then calculate. If you don't have the same operating system that I do, then it'll look like linear regression and then L1, and then you have to put a comma and then L2. By the way, if you're wanting L1 to show up, it's second and then the number 1 button. If you're wanting L2 to show up, it's second and then the number 2 button. Now let's calculate that. And sure enough, this gives me my least squares regression line. This says my line looks like y equals ax plus b, where the number A is 0.5611 approximately, and the number B is negative 1095.60. So this is my least squares regression line. Notice that the way I have it, it did not give me my Pearson correlation coefficient. You might see your Pearson correlation coefficient now. If you're like me, where you didn't see your Pearson correlation coefficient, the way to get that is to go into the catalog, and then you can scroll all the way down to D, or you can hit just alpha and then D, and turn your diagnostics on. So the reason why I'm not seeing my correlation coefficient is because right now the diagnostics on this calculator are turned off. So I want those diagnostics turned on. Just hit enter and then enter again. It'll say diagnostics are now on. And then go back into that stats menu, scroll over to calculate, and do your linear regression on list 1 and list 2. Again, X's are list 1, Y's are list 2. And now you'll not only see the least squares regression line, but you'll also see an R squared and an R. That R is our Pearson correlation coefficient. So in this case, the Pearson correlation coefficient is 0.9923, and the line we get is y equals 0.5611 times x minus 1095.60. So that's how we can find the regression line and the Pearson correlation coefficient with our calculator. And this is exactly what I got out. Sometimes in different classes, they'll ask you to round to different values, but this is it. The line is y equals 0.5611x minus 1095.6. You can see that I got that with the TI-84, but you can also get this line using other programs like Excel as well. It'll give you the exact same line. Now, one other thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a scatter plot. So let's take a look at how to do that with the calculator. I already have the correct data in my calculator. I have list 1 and list 2. So if I want to create a scatter plot with my calculator, I just have to hit second and then go to the stat plot menu and turn one of these plots on. The scatter plot is the first type with dots, and the X list is list 1. Remember that second and the number 1. The Y list is L2, and then you can use whatever mark you want. You can use a square or a plus symbol or a dot or a smaller dot. I'll use black, but this you can also use red or whatever color you pick. Now, one thing before we go and graph this, I do want to hit y equals and make sure that there's no other graphs in here. I want to clear those out if I can. So if there were something in there, I'd clear those out. Now what we can do is graph it. We just have to hit zoom. And then the best way I've found to graph this is using zoom 9. That will give me the best window. That's zoom stat. And you can see the scatter plot here on my calculator. Now, one other thing that sometimes people do, sometimes people will also graph the line, the least squares regression line with that. If you want to do that, there's two ways to do it. You can go to the y equals menu and type your line in, or you can store your regression equation when you go into the calculate linear regression. So we calculate linear regression, and you can actually store your regression equation in the y1 value. Now, what we have to do is just store our regression equation in y1. Y1 is going to be in the variables menu. Hit the VARS right here underneath the down arrow, and then go to y variables. Here we're looking at the function, and then y1. And then calculate that. And again, here's my least squares regression line. Here's my Pearson correlation coefficient. If you now hit y equals, you'll see your least squares regression line is in the y1 spot. And then I'll just hit graph. That'll go back to the last window I had. And you can see the least squares regression line here. So that stores the regression line into y1. You can also do it manually by just hitting y1 and then typing in this. And again, depending on how you like to round, you might round it to like 0.56 times x minus 1095.60. Again, when you do the store regression, store that equation, it gives you lots of decimals. But there you go. That's how to both create the scatter plot and also create the graph of that least squares regression line on your calculator. One other little extra tidbit, if you hit the trace button, the first thing it gives you is the plot, so you can jump from point to point. In 2009, there were 31.42 billions of barrels of oil. And in 2010, we get that. And you can get all those points. If you hit the up or down arrow, then it will take you to the line, and you can trace on the line as well. So you can trace around that line if you like to do that. So there you go. That shows you how to do the least squares regression line, the Pearson correlation coefficient, and to create the scatter plot on your calculator. That's the only example that I'll do for this one. But if you want to look at other examples, there are other examples in some of my other videos.